You think this pain is breaking you, don't you? Every sleepless night, every silent tear, every moment you felt like disappearing. You called it suffering. You called it bad luck. You called it the end of you. But what if I told you this isn't destruction?
It's construction.
See, pain doesn't show up to destroy the weak. It shows up to expose them. It strips away the fake smiles, the soft excuses, the comfortable lies you've been hiding behind. It forces you to meet the version of yourself you've been running from. And that version, it's not soft, it's not kind, it doesn't beg for validation. It learns, it adapts, it hardens. Every betrayal you felt, it sharpened your awareness. Every failure, it rewired your thinking. Every time you were ignored, disrespected, underestimated, something inside you stopped asking for permission. But here's the part no one tells you. You're not ready for what this pain is turning you into. Because once it's done with you, you won't recognize yourself anymore. You keep calling it punishment like the world singled you out. Like something out there decided you deserved to suffer more than everyone else. That's the lie you tell yourself so you don't have to face what's really happening. Because if this is punishment, then you're a victim, and victims don't have to change. Victims get to sit in their pain, repeat their stories, and wait for something to save them. But this isn't that. This is preparation. Pain doesn't arrive randomly, and it doesn't stay without purpose. It presses on the exact places you've been avoiding, the weak points you kept hidden under distractions and fake confidence. It forces you into corners where your usual excuses stop working. Suddenly, the things you used to rely on, people, comfort, approval, they start disappearing. And you're left alone with something you've been trying to escape for a long time yourself. And that's where it begins. Because preparation doesn't feel good. It's not supposed to. It's not designed to comfort you or hold your hand. It's designed to break patterns, to tear down the version of you that was too soft to survive what's coming. Every uncomfortable moment you face is doing something behind the scenes. It's training your mind to stop reacting and start observing. It's teaching you how to sit in chaos without falling apart. It's showing you that you can endure more than you ever believed. But you don't see it like that, do you? You see loss, not detachment. You see failure, not redirection. You see loneliness, not independence. So you resist it, you fight it. You question why it's happening to you, instead of asking what it's trying to build inside you. And every time you resist, it gets louder. The pressure increases. The discomfort deepens. Not because it hates you, but because you're still not listening. Preparation is ruthless like that. It doesn't care about your timeline. It doesn't slow down because you're tired. It keeps pushing until something inside you shifts. Until the version of you that needed validation starts to disappear. Until the part of you that depended on others to feel strong begins to fade. Until you stop looking for easy ways out and start standing still in the fire. And slowly something changes. You begin to notice things you ignored before. Patterns in people. Patterns in yourself. You stop reacting to every little thing because you've felt worse. You've survived worse. The things that used to shake you barely touch you now. Not because life got easier, but because you got harder. That's what preparation does. It reshapes you in ways comfort never could. It removes the need for constant reassurance. It replaces fragile confidence with something quieter, something more dangerous. You don't need to prove anything anymore, because you've already faced the parts of yourself most people are terrified of. And the strange part is, the pain doesn't disappear. It just changes its role. It stops being something that controls you and starts becoming something you understand. Something you use. You don't run from it anymore. You don't collapse under it. You let it exist without letting it define you. Because now you see it for what it really is. Not a curse. Not bad luck. Not some cruel twist of fate. A process. A system designed to strip away everything unnecessary until only something real remains. Something unshaken. Something that doesn't break under pressure because it was built in it. And the more you go through it, the more you realize this was never about hurting you. It was about creating someone who can't be hurt the same way again. You spend so much time trying to show the world who you are, carefully choosing your words, adjusting your behavior, wearing masks that fit whatever room you walk into. You smile when you're expected to. You stay quiet when it's safer. You pretend things don't bother you just to keep everything stable. It works for a while. People see what you want them to see. They accept the version of you that's easy to understand. But suffering doesn't care about that version. It doesn't negotiate with your image or respect the character you've been playing. It cuts straight through it. No warning, no permission. One moment you're in control, and the next everything starts slipping. The things you depended on begin to fall apart. The people you thought would stay start fading. The certainty you built your identity on starts cracking. And suddenly, there's no mask left to hide behind. That's when it happens. Not when everything is going right. Not when life feels comfortable and predictable. It happens when you're pushed into a place where pretending takes too much energy, where holding it together feels impossible, where the truth starts leaking out no matter how hard you try to contain it. Suffering reveals you. Not the version you present, but the one underneath. The one you've been avoiding. The one that reacts when control disappears. The one that shows up when there's nothing left to lose. You start noticing things you didn't want to admit before. The fear that controls your decisions. The anger you buried so deep, it started shaping your behavior without you realizing it. The insecurity that made you seek approval from people who never deserved your attention. It all comes to the surface, unfiltered, undeniable. And it's uncomfortable. Because now you can't lie to yourself anymore. You can't say you're strong when every setback breaks you. You can't say you don't care when rejection consumes your thoughts. You can't say you're in control when your emotions are running everything behind the scenes. Suffering exposes every contradiction you've been living with. But it doesn't stop there. It also reveals something else as something quieter, something harder to notice at first. Your capacity. The part of you that keeps going even when you feel like shutting down. The part that endures when everything feels pointless. The part that adapts slowly, painfully, but consistently. You begin to see that you're not as fragile as you thought, but you're also not as put together as you pretended to be. And that realization changes things. Because once you see yourself clearly, you can't unsee it. The illusions lose their power. The fake confidence, the forced positivity, the need to be liked, it all starts to feel hollow. You begin to understand that who you thought you were was built on comfort, not truth. Suffering strips that away. It doesn't ask you who you want to be. It shows you who you are when everything else is gone. When there's no applause, no support, no easy escape, just you and the way you respond to pressure. Do you collapse or do you adapt? Do you run or do you face it? Do you blame or do you take control? Every moment of suffering forces you to answer those questions, not with words, but with actions. And those actions, they start defining you more than any label ever could. That's the part most people avoid, because it's easier to live in a controlled environment where your identity feels safe, where you can manage how others see you, where you can avoid situations that might expose your weaknesses. But suffering doesn't allow that luxury. It puts you in situations where your weaknesses are unavoidable, where your habits are tested, where your mindset is stretched to its limit. And in that process, it reveals both your flaws and your potential at the same time. And the more you go through it, the more you start understanding something most people never fully grasp. You were never just one thing. Not as strong as you claimed. Not as weak as you feared. Something in between, something unfinished. something that only pressure could shape into something real. You chase comfort like it's a reward, like it's something you've earned after surviving just enough struggle to justify a break. You build your life around its soft routines, predictable days, familiar faces that don't challenge you too much. Everything feels safe there, controlled, manageable, and for a while, you convince yourself this is what peace looks like.
But it's not peace.
It's a cage one you decorate so well you forget you're trapped inside it. Comfort doesn't attack you the way pain does. It doesn't break you suddenly or force you into chaos. It's quieter than that. It slowly reshapes you without you noticing. It makes you settle for less than what you're capable of. It convinces you that staying the same is safer than risking change. And the worst part, it feels good while it's happening. That's how it wins. Because you don't resist comfort. You invite it in. You protect it. You start avoiding anything that threatens it. Challenges become inconveniences. Risks become dangers. Growth becomes something you'll deal with later. And later never comes. You start to shrink without realizing it. Not physically, but mentally. Your tolerance for discomfort drops. The things that once pushed you forward now feel overwhelming. You hesitate more. You doubt more. You overthink things you used to handle without effort. And slowly, your world gets smaller. Not because life changed, but because you did. Comfort makes you dependent. It teaches you to rely on external stability instead of internal strength. You need things to go your way just to feel okay. You need people to act a certain way just to stay calm. And the moment something disrupts that balance, you feel it immediately. Anxiety, frustration, confusion. Because you've forgotten how to deal with uncertainty. That's the trap. Comfort convinces you that you're in control, but the truth is it's controlling you. It dictates your choices, limits your actions, and keeps you locked in patterns that feel safe but lead nowhere. You stop exploring your potential because you're too busy maintaining your comfort zone. And the longer you stay there, the harder it becomes to leave. Because now, discomfort feels unfamiliar. It feels threatening. Even small challenges start to feel bigger than they are. You hesitate before taking action. You question yourself more. You wait for the perfect moment that never arrives. And all the while, something inside you knows that you're capable of more, knows that this version of you isn't complete, knows that you've traded growth for temporary ease. But instead of facing that truth, you distract yourself. You scroll, you watch, you wait. Anything to avoid stepping into something uncertain, because comfort has made uncertainty feel like danger. But it's not. It's the only place where change happens. Everything that has ever made you stronger came from discomfort. Every skill, every lesson, every shift in your mindset, it all came from moments where things didn't feel easy. Moments where you had to adapt, to think differently, to push through resistance. Comfort doesn't give you that. It keeps you the same. It numbs your edge. It softens your instincts. It makes you forget what you're capable of under pressure. And when real challenges finally show up, you're not ready for them. Not because you couldn't be, but because you chose not to be. That's why comfort is dangerous. Not because it feels bad, but because it feels too good. Good enough to keep you still. Good enough to make you ignore the part of you that's meant to evolve. Good enough to convince you that this limited, controlled, predictable version of life is all there is. And the moment you start believing that you stop becoming anything more, you think power comes from speaking louder, proving yourself, explaining every move so people understand you. You think strength is in being seen, being heard, being validated. So you talk and talk and talk, trying to justify your existence to people who were never really listening in the first place. But silence is different. Silence doesn't beg. It doesn't explain. It doesn't defend. It doesn't react. It observes. And the moment you learn to stay silent, something inside you starts changing in ways you don't immediately understand. At first, it feels uncomfortable. You're used to filling the gaps, to responding instantly, to making sure no one misinterprets you. You feel the urge to speak, to correct, to prove. But when you resist that urge, when you choose not to say anything, you start noticing things you've been missing your whole life. People reveal themselves, not through what they say, but through what they do when you stop reacting. You begin to see patterns. The ones who only valued you when you gave them attention. The ones who twist your words just to feel in control. The ones who needed your reactions to feel powerful. And when you go silent, when you stop feeding that cycle, they become uncomfortable. Because now, they don't control the narrative anymore. You do. Silence gives you space. Space to think without pressure. Space to understand without interruption. Space to separate emotion from reality. Instead of reacting instantly, you begin to process. You start seeing situations for what they are, not what they feel like in the moment. And that alone, that shift, changes everything. Because reactions are predictable. They're easy to manipulate. Anyone can push your buttons if they know you'll respond every time. But silence is unpredictable. It creates uncertainty. It forces others to question themselves instead of controlling you. And that's where it becomes dangerous. Not loud, not aggressive, not obvious, but controlled. You stop wasting energy on things that don't deserve it. Arguments lose their grip on you. You no longer feel the need to win every conversation or prove every point. Because you realize something most people never do. Not everything requires your voice. Some things require your absence. And in that absence, your presence becomes stronger. People start noticing the difference. The way you don't react the same way anymore. The way you don't chase explanations. The way you don't rush to fill silence just to keep things comfortable. It unsettles them. Because they were used to a version of you that was easier to read, easier to influence, easier to control. But now you're not giving them anything. No reactions. No unnecessary words. No emotional responses they can use against you. Just stillness. And in that stillness, there's control. You begin to understand that silence isn't weakness. It's discipline. It's knowing when speaking adds value and when it only exposes you. It's realizing that not every thought needs to be shared. Not every feeling needs to be expressed. Not every situation deserves your energy. You become selective with your words, with your time, with your attention. And that selectiveness, it sharpens you. Because now, when you do speak, it matters. It carries weight. It's not noise, it's intention. People listen differently when they're not used to hearing from you all the time. Your words stop being routine and start becoming impactful. But more importantly, you listen more than you speak. And listening, really listening, gives you an advantage most people overlook. You understand people without them realizing it. You pick up on things they don't say. You notice the inconsistencies, the hidden motives, the subtle shifts in behavior. All because you chose silence over reaction. And the more you practice it, the stronger it becomes. Not as a tool to isolate yourself, but as a way to control yourself, to stay grounded when things try to pull you into chaos, to remain calm when others expect you to explode, to hold your position without needing to announce it. That's the kind of strength that doesn't need attention. The kind that doesn't look impressive on the surface, but changes everything underneath. Because once you master silence, you're no longer predictable. You never really expect it not from them. That's what makes it hit the way it does. Betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the ones you trusted enough to lower your guard around. The ones you gave access to your thoughts, your time, your energy. You didn't prepare for it because you didn't think you had to. And then it happens. Not always loud, not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. A shift in behavior. A broken promise. A moment where you realize they weren't who you thought they were. And in that moment, something cracks. Not just your trust in them, but your trust in your own judgment. That's the part that stays with you. You start questioning everything. How did you not see it? Were the signs always there? Were you ignoring them on purpose? You replay conversations in your head, analyze details you once overlooked. Search for the exact moment things changed. And the more you think about it, the clearer it becomes. It wasn't sudden. You just weren't paying attention, because trust has a way of blinding you. It makes you focus on what you want to believe instead of what's actually happening. You overlook inconsistencies. You justify behavior that doesn't sit right. You give chances when boundaries should have been drawn, not because you're weak, but because you chose connection over caution, until that choice costs you. And when it does, something inside you shifts, not into bitterness, but into awareness. At first, it feels like pain, anger, disappointment. You feel the urge to close yourself off, to avoid trusting anyone again, to protect yourself by building walls so high nothing can reach you. But if you stay there, if you let betrayal turn you cold, then it wins twice. Because now it's not just something that hurt you. It's something that changed you in the worst way. But that's not what it's meant to do. Betrayal isn't there to destroy your ability to trust. It's there to refine it. It forces you to see people differently. Not through emotion, not through assumption, but through patterns, through actions, through consistency. You begin to realize that words mean nothing without behavior to support them. That loyalty isn't what someone says. It's what they repeatedly show. And once you understand that, you start seeing things earlier. The small red flags you used to ignore. The subtle signs of dishonesty. The way someone treats others when they think no one's paying attention. You pick up on energy shifts, on inconsistencies, on intentions that don't match appearances. Because now you're watching. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. You stop giving blind trust and start giving measured trust. You don't hand out access to your life just because someone feels familiar or says the right things. You let time reveal people instead of rushing to believe in them. And that patience, that control, becomes your protection. You're no longer easy to deceive. Not because you expect the worst, but because you understand how easily perception can be manipulated. You've seen it. You've felt it. And that experience becomes something valuable, something sharp. Because now, when someone steps out of line, you notice. When something feels off, you don't ignore it. You don't need proof right away. You don't need confrontation. You don't need drama. You just observe. You adjust. You create distance without needing to explain yourself. That's the difference. Before, you needed clarity from others. Now you create it for yourself. Betrayal teaches you that not everyone deserves your trust, but more importantly, it teaches you that not everyone deserves your doubt either. It's not about becoming paranoid. It's about becoming precise, knowing where to invest your energy and where to hold back. And the more you learn from it, the less power it has over you. Because now it's not something that can catch you off guard the same way again. It becomes something you recognize, something you navigate, something you understand without letting it break you. And that understanding, that quiet awareness, makes you harder to fool than you've ever been before. Failure, you treat it like a verdict. Like a final decision stamped on your life that says you weren't enough, you weren't ready, you weren't built for this. You let one outcome define your entire identity, as if a single moment has the authority to decide who you are and who you'll become. So when it happens, you shrink. You replay it over and over again, not to understand it, but to punish yourself with it. Every mistake becomes proof. Every misstep becomes confirmation that maybe you're not capable after all. And the more you think like that, the more you start avoiding situations where failure could happen again. Because you don't want to feel that again. That's where most people get stuck. They don't fail once they stop trying entirely. They build a life around avoiding discomfort, avoiding risk, avoiding anything that might expose them again. And in doing that, they lock themselves into the very version of life that failure was trying to pull them out of. Because failure isn't an ending, it's an interruption. A forced pause that breaks your current way of thinking. It disrupts your patterns, challenges your assumptions, and exposes the gaps between where you are and where you thought you were. It shows you the difference between confidence and capability. And that difference matters, because confidence without capability collapses the moment it's tested. But failure builds something deeper than confidence. It builds awareness. It forces you to look at your actions, your decisions, your habits, without illusion. You start asking different questions. Not, why did this happen to me? But, what did I miss? Not, why am I not good enough? But where do I need to improve? That shift, small as it seems, changes everything. Because now failure becomes information. Every mistake carries data. Every setback reveals a flaw in your approach, your timing, your mindset. And if you're willing to look at it without ego, without trying to protect your image, you start learning things you could never learn through success alone. Success hides your weaknesses. Failure exposes them. And once they're exposed, you have a choice. Ignore them and repeat the same patterns, or face them and evolve. That's where rewiring begins. Not in the moment of failure itself, but in what you do after it. Do you adjust or do you retreat? Do you analyze or do you blame? Do you rebuild or do you give up? Every time you choose to learn instead of escape, something in your thinking starts to shift. You stop seeing obstacles as threats and start seeing them as challenges to solve. You become less emotional about outcomes and more focused on process. You detach from the need to be perfect. Because you understand now perfection was never the goal. Growth was. And growth is messy. It's inconsistent. It requires trial and error, repetition, discomfort. It demands that you step into situations where you might fail again. Not because you want to, but because that's where improvement happens. That's what rewiring looks like. It's not dramatic. It's not instant. It's slow, subtle, almost invisible at first. A change in how you think, how you react, how you approach problems. You become more patient, more focused, less driven by emotion and more by understanding. And over time, those changes compound. The things that once felt impossible start to feel manageable. The situations that used to overwhelm you become familiar. You stop panicking when things go wrong, because you've learned how to respond instead of react. That's when failure loses its power. Not because it stops happening, but because it stops controlling you. It becomes part of the process instead of a barrier to it. Something expected, something accepted, something used. You don't attach your identity to it anymore. You don't let it define your worth or your potential. You let it teach you. And the more it teaches you, the more dangerous you become. Because now you're not afraid to try again. You keep thinking this is just a phasey. Something temporary, something you'll get through, and then go back to who you were before. That's the illusion you hold on to because it feels safer. Familiar. You tell yourself that once the pain fades, once things settle, once life becomes easier again, you'll return to normal. But there is no normal waiting for you. That version of you, it's already slipping away. Every experience you've been through, every moment that pushed you past your limits, every time something inside you cracked and had to rebuild, it's been changing you. Not in loud, obvious ways, but quietly, deeply. In places you don't even look at until something triggers them. You're not the same person who started this. And the more you go through it, the less recognizable you become. At first, it's subtle. Small shifts in how you think. You stop reacting the way you used to. Things that once mattered start losing their weight. You don't chase the same validation. You don't entertain the same distractions. You don't tolerate the same behavior. It confuses people because they remember who you were. and they expect you to stay that way. But you can't, because something inside you has already moved on.
You've seen too much.
Felt too much. Understood things you can't unsee now. And once your perspective changes, everything else follows. Conversations feel different. Relationships feel different. Even your own thoughts start sounding unfamiliar. You begin to question things you once accepted without hesitation. You start pulling away from environments that no longer align with who you're becoming. Not out of arrogance, but out of awareness. You realize that staying the same requires pretending, and pretending starts to feel exhausting. So you stop. And when you stop pretending, people notice. Not because you announce it, not because you explain yourself, but because your energy shifts. You're quieter, more controlled, less reactive. You don't seek attention the same way. You don't need constant interaction to feel grounded. You become harder to read, and that makes others uncomfortable, because they don't know where they stand with you anymore. But the truth is, you're still figuring out where you stand with yourself. That's the part no one talks about. Transformation isn't clean. It's not a smooth transition from one version of you to another. It's confusing, disorienting. There are moments where you don't fully recognize your own thoughts, your own reactions. You catch yourself responding differently, and it feels almost unfamiliar, like you're watching yourself from the outside. And that uncertainty, it makes you wonder if something's wrong. But it's not. It's a sign that something is changing at a level you can't control anymore. You're not forcing this growth. You're not carefully designing it. It's happening because of everything you've been through. Every moment of pressure, every situation that demanded more from you than you thought you could give. It's been shaping you into something that doesn't fit your old identity. And that's why it feels uncomfortable. Because you're outgrowing yourself. The habits, the mindset, the emotional patterns that once defined you, they don't sit the same anymore. You try to go back sometimes, just to feel that familiarity again. But it doesn't work. It feels forced. It feels off. Because deep down, you know you've already changed. And there's no going back to something that no longer fits. So you move forward. Even if you don't fully understand what you're becoming. Even if it feels uncertain. Even if it feels isolating at times. Because staying where you were, that's no longer an option. You've crossed a line without realizing it. And now you're becoming something even you don't fully recognize yet.